Hi, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on workflow optimization for inclusive OERs. My name is Amanda Gray. This is my colleague, Karen Meijer.
Before we begin, we want to mention that KPU's 5 campuses are located on the unceded and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen who bestowed their name on our university, the Musqueam, Katsi, Semiahmoo, Tawasan, Kikite, and Coquitlam peoples. These nations have lived on and cared for the lands we work on since time immemorial. However, for long periods of time, and for some nations in BC still today, First Nations people have been removed from their traditional and ancestral lands. The removal and disconnection from the land, compounded by over 150 years of damaging governmental policies, have resulted in inequality between First Nations peoples and settler descendants who have been benefiting from being on that land. In the context of this presentation, we want to highlight that the communities and reserves that Indigenous peoples were removed to often lack accessibility infrastructures. While our personal options for improving physical accessibility needs for First Nations peoples are limited, we can meaningfully contribute to other accessibility needs of our First Nations students. Addressing inequality is one of the primary driving motivations for people engaged in open education work, and open educational practices can be a significant tool for improving equity and giving students voice and choice. We hope that our work at KPU will have a positive effect on our Indigenous students and on the wider Indigenous community. At KPU, publishing is supported by a partnership between the Teaching and Learning Commons and the library. We provide a suite of services and supports that together make up our open publishing suite Opus. In today's presentation, we're going to share the various ways that we have incorporated accessibility into our publishing workflows at almost every step of the publishing process. We're going to begin with an overview of what our publishing workflow is, and then talk about how we have incorporated accessibility during the various stages. We're going to end by sharing our current project, which is an accessibility audit for our Beck Pressbooks catalog.
So let's talk about what our publishing workflow is. So this is a visualization, and it's gone through several changes over the years as we've made updates and refined things and made updates. So we start with project conception and planning, then the actual writing, followed by editing and revisions. Then we head into the publication stages where we are getting ready to publish, we publish, and then all of the things that we do after publication. And we've identified that we can address accessibility during every phase leading up to publication. So, how did we do that? First off, before a publishing project even starts, we need to make clear what Opus's position on accessibility is. We created and used an accessibility statement to inform faculty of our expectations when it comes to our published works. We also wanted to state our commitment to accessibility publicly and also to educate on why accessibility is important, especially in an open education context. So this is the first half of our accessibility statement, which outlines why accessibility is important for OERs. We specifically highlight our goal to make resources more inclusive, sustainable, and shareable. The second half of the accessibility statement is our commitment to publishing WCAG compliant OER and some of the methods that we're using. This is something we can now point to when we're working with faculty and requiring that they follow accessible practices.
So to start with, the grant application process now includes a question specifically asking how applicants plan to address accessibility in their OER projects. This proactive step encourages thoughtful consideration of accessibility from the outset. We provide a link to the BC Campus Accessibility Toolkit to give them some ideas, and then we ask, how will you address accessibility in your project? We provide the assessment rubric that we will be using to adjudicate their application, and that includes an evaluation of their accessibility plan. We also revise the project agreements that we set up at the beginning of a project with OER grant recipients, explicitly discussing common accessibility pitfalls identified during the assessment. This ensures that creators are aware of potential issues and can plan accordingly. In the project agreement, we will discuss and agree with faculty how accessibility will be addressed and who is responsible for this. And so on this slide, you will see some examples of the things that we will agree upon.
Once the content has been written, many faculty use our conversion service, where we take their work and recreate it on the chosen platform, in this case, Pressbooks. This work is usually done by open education student assistants and library assistants. When training new assistants to do this work, we have an entire module focused on accessibility standards. We also use this opportunity to prompt them to think about accessibility being for everyone and reflect on the ways that accessibility standards are helpful to them personally. We also demonstrate one of the tools that we use to assess a book on its accessibility, the Wave browser plugin. Adding this training means that the training does take longer to complete, but by equipping them with the necessary knowledge and skills, they're able to spot and fix accessibility issues immediately when doing the conversion, which reduces the amount of editing that we have to do later.
An accessibility review is part of the pre-publication checklist, and so by catching any oversights early, we aim to minimize accessibility gaps in our OERs. As already mentioned before, we use the Wave browser plugin to assess the book, as well as do spot checking for known common issues. Every book will then receive an accessibility statement in the front matter, as well as a section on how to use this book, and we've created templates for these to make them easy and consistent. The accessibility statement will list the ways in which the book is accessible. Here's a section from an accessibility statement that talks about how it has been optimized for screen readers. Accessibility statements also list the ways in which accessibility can be improved upon, including the timelines and known issues for which we don't yet have a plan for improvement. The How to Use This Book page explains how to navigate the Pressbooks platform, how to use the search feature, and it has a section on alternative formats. While these don't have anything to do with being WCAG compliant, it increases the ease of use for students and provides direction and clarity for a platform that students may be using for the first time.
So that's what we're doing in our current publishing practices. But we have been publishing books for over 5 years, and our earlier publications did not go through these processes. So we just want to end by mentioning that we do have a project for updating our back catalog. We've created an accessibility rubric that identifies what changes need to be made and are slowly working at implementing the changes to bring them up to standard. So that is how we're incorporating accessibility into our publishing practices at KPU. And here's what we've learned. By setting clear expectations with our authors from the beginning, we can ensure that we end up with the most accessible resources possible, or at least catch all the big issues early. We've also learned that it's important to iterate for continual improvement, to go back and make small changes, seeing what works best, and how to continually improve on your processes. There will always be something to do better, something to make smoother, or obstacles to overcome. So do what you can with what you have and go from there. Thank you so much for coming to this presentation.